I would say the biggest lesson learned is communication. Earlier on in my technician days, I'd come in early, I'd stay late, trying to get my work done with nobody around and nobody there to ask more questions, kind of lurk around corners, make sure people weren't around and sneak in, sneak out. As my career grew, I began to realize the importance of communication. My current role right now, working so closely with the lab, we have work that we're trying to schedule, or, something happens midday. The first thought goes to, who do I need to notify? Who does this impact?
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm thrilled to announce today's guest. He's a certified facility professional. He supervises, mentors, and develops teams of engineers. He's overseeing critical infrastructure. He plays a pivotal role in ensuring operations are running as they should. He's currently the senior manager of facilities and lab infrastructure at Cerevel Therapeutics. Please welcome Mike Rich. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for the invite.
Of course. It's my pleasure. I'm psyched to get into a discussion with you today. So I guess my question for you is, we'll jump right into it, right? What's been your biggest lesson learned as a facility manager through the years?
It's hard to narrow down just one. I would say the biggest lesson learned is probably communication. Earlier on in my technician days, I'd come in early, I'd stay late, trying to get my work done with nobody around and nobody there to ask more questions, kind of lurk around corners, make sure people weren't around and sneak in, sneak out. But as my career grew and, I began to realize the importance of communication. And, my current role right now, working so closely with the lab, especially, my first, we have work that we're trying to schedule, or, something happens midday. The first thought goes to, who do I need to notify? Who does this impact? So I think communication is probably one of the more important aspects that sometimes often gets overlooked as well.
I would agree, it's critical. And especially you mentioned in a lab setting. How does it differ, or does it differ in a lab setting as opposed to, any other environment you've been in?
Um, it can get pretty critical. Any little change. So particularly now, we work very closely with our animal facility as well. My company is neurological, so they do a lot of studies that are behavioral in nature. So it's not as simple as even sound. So, impacts of sound with work going on, airflow, every little aspect could be critical to their studies.
And in terms of the I didn't know you had an animal facility, actually. So is that on site where you are, or
Yes.
another location? Okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Smaller than what I've been used to, but
Yeah, right.
we do have one.
So in terms of, again, we didn't even think about the sound aspect, right? So that's interesting. Is there a communication tree, or what's your preferred method of communication, with your team or maybe outside your team?
We have shared calendars with our team, views into other shared calendars for the animal facility team as well. And then just in addition to the general lab also. So any type of work we try to schedule, we're looking at potentially 3 or 4 different calendars to get that okay.
Got it. So, and you did say it's hard to nail down one lesson learned. So we can cover, I know there's a ton of them, so we can definitely cover a handful of them. On the communication piece, is there any type of, how do you prepare for proper communication? Is there any preparation, any framework or anything like that?
That gets pretty tricky sometimes too, because people are very particular about their methods. I've dealt with some people that, they want everything in an email, so there's a paper trail going back. Other people want that face to face, or if a phone call. a conversation. So it's really, you have to feel out your audience and know, what type of communication works best, and as well as factor in the urgency. If something's happens midday and, we need to respond quickly, email might not be seen till the end of the day or potentially the next day with, hybrid schedules in play.
Got it.
So a
That makes
phone call
sense.
may work best.
I remember one of our mutual friends, I think he referred to it as the drive-by in the hallway,
Yeah.
right? When there isn't any documentation, does that happen to you? If so, like, how do you handle that?
Absolutely. So we actually just put in a CMMS system within the past few months. So
Mhm.
up until then, the main source of our workload was the drive-bys, and, somebody grabbing you in the hallway. Hey, I need this. Hey, I need that. Hey, can we do this? So it happens. As we begin to get rolling with the CMMS, we're trying to move away from that and move to more records based, but the conversations still take place and the asks still happen.
That's where our follow through has to be stellar, right? Like
Absolutely.
everything we're keeping up here. Anything else around communication, Mike, in general, like anything in terms of external versus internal, and how do you juggle it all? Any best practices you could share with the audience? I'm sure that appreciate. I would as well.
Just try to find, with every, whether it be internal with the team or external with vendors, um, you know, more communication is usually better than less. So
Mhm.
if one method isn't solving the problem, then, sometimes you need to move on, try a second or third even.
You mentioned preparation as I'm trying to remember how we discussed it. It was, something around creating lists and being prepared through creating lists and things like that. Share knowledge with your team. I don't know if we're kind of bridging topics here, or is there anything with that, Mike?
Yeah, no, that I think that also falls into the best practices. In the past sites, my site now, we've created multiple lists on, what happens if we lose city water, what happens if we lose power, and just to have that knowledge written down on paper. Like right now, my facilities technician is out on paternity leave, so we're passing a lot of those responsibilities onto a temporary technician who's not very familiar with our site. So that's where, that knowledge being down on a list on a piece of paper, tangible, you can touch it, see it. And, now that person, it's easier to get them in the mix when something goes on so that they
That's
can
smart.
respond.
I think that's a pretty global topic too for any business you're in, because if it's all up in someone's head, like how would you handle it, right? With maternity leave or paternity leave or anything like that, and if someone's out for any reason at all.
Yep. We tend to do cheat sheets as well. So a piece of equipment goes down, right near the piece of equipment, we have a cheat sheet. How does this go back up? How does this reset? So
Smart. So even I could go in there and do it, Mike.
you could,
I
you
could
could.
figure it out. Would
Some
you
of
let
the
me?
very simple step by step.
Good, good. That'll suit me
I
perfectly.
prefer to be on the phone when someone is performing those steps, but I'm trying to let go of that as well.
Ooh, talk about that. When you say let go, is it do you prefer to like touch and fix things yourself, or like what do you mean by that?
Yeah, coming from a technician background where I was hands on, that's probably another one of my challenges. Getting into more of a management role is letting go of some of the smaller, what seems to be smaller tasks,
Mhm.
and allowing the technicians to have that freedom to fail on their own.
Sure. They say that what, not failure, but experience is the best teacher. So
Yeah, I mean, that was how I learned for the most part. I had some good teachers as well, but, I had a lot of times when, nothing bad, but I screwed up. You learn more from that sometimes than from the actual learning about the task and the steps.
100% agree. Oh yeah. Um, I might be racing forward, pull me back. But I remember we had also talked, Mike, about um maybe inspections and preparedness for inspections. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you talked about test runs.
Yeah. So you know, we're a startup company. I don't think we're imminent on inspections. Well, we've had a MWRA inspection already. We've had a couple, but we are trying to build that culture of preparing for inspections and audits, because they could happen at any time. So we have a binder down at the front desk. We do practice runs. So the binder will anyone who's involved, like who might show up. There's a tab for each potential inspector, and then everything from who needs to be notified. So sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's more than one person. So who's notified, right down to what is the procedure to kind of house them in a temp conference room until they're met. We don't want people just wandering around the building.
Who built that? That sounds like a great
It was
system.
a team effort, multiple different people, kind of all pulled together, got some ideas and put together the binder, and that sits right at the front desk. So even, down to the receptionist, she knows what to do when, what her role is.
Have you ever staged it so there's, it's a difficult test run, or, yeah, how do they go?
They usually go pretty well. I mean, it's all step by step. It's not, we don't have very complex tasks. And then the notification process goes. The worst thing we've had to deal with is, the main contact not being available with, hybrid schedules or people being out. So,
Got it.
but we try to keep backup and, just make sure everybody knows how to respond to situations.
Perfect. So what's the cadence? How often do you do a test run? Because I don't hear a lot of people talking about this. Maybe we just haven't broached the topic, but how often?
They're usually pretty random. I would say we try to hit each one at least every year. But if, especially if we happen to not do so well, then that might become a little more frequent. But we did respond pretty well when we tested, and so we try to keep it as needed.
Excellent. What's an example of, like, when you say if didn't do so well, like what could have failed, or what wouldn't go right?
Well, I mean, not having the right information, not having the proper documentation.
Got it.
Even something as far as giving someone a tour of the space that they're here to look at, and it's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to keep everything audit ready and neat and tidy. We don't want to create any the illusion that they need to dig deeper than what they're here to see.
Love it. And I think, so if it doesn't go well, what's at stake? Like, you guys work with, if I'm getting this correct, neurological disorders, or cures for them, or treatment for schizophrenia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. I mean, this is pretty serious work that you're doing. So, yeah, what's at stake if things don't go right?
Well, there could be multiple. One, being potential. If it was the FDA and they were checking on drugs or processes, then that could go very bad. That could cause delays in what we do, and the releases of some of our drugs. If it's not that anything is significantly less critical, but if it was an inspection on our wastewater system, there could be potentially a fine. That could be it just doesn't.
It's fair to say there's plenty at stake, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah,
I'm trying to. I'm running through every 12 different scenarios in my head right now, and it's not. Failing is not good.
Yeah, we got it. Failure is not an option.
Yeah. So not to mention we're all professionals as well, and we don't want to fail. We want to be the best at what we do.
Well, and I think that's why we're talking about this, right? It's not about the failure. It's just, like, how do you best prepare to succeed? And I think that's exactly what you're illustrating with us right now, Mike. These test runs, the documentation, the audit manuals, and everything is fantastic. So obviously you guys are very prepared. It's just, go to best case, worst case scenarios. And I think, Well, I'm learning from what you're running us through right now. It's great. You told me a story about, I think you said one of your lab techs or facility techs is going on paternity leave, right? And um, but I wanted to back up if you could kind of run us through. It goes to the point of how you look for somebody, right? They might be a great plumber, they might be a great technician, but I think if I recall, can they work in a lab environment? You made that distinction. You mind tell us the story of how you came upon this person and how he ended up working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. To start, I mean, my background wasn't originally a lab either, but when I first started in life sciences, my biggest difficulty was just knowing, uh, you know, what can you do, what can you not do in a lab setting. Um, so we, when we were at the point where we were looking for a technician, we put a job description out, put a post to the job, and we got a few people candidates that we interviewed. Yeah, some were highly skilled, some were very experienced outside of the life science setting. Uh, but we also looked at this position as this is going to be somebody that's going to be working heavily in a lab. So to try to alleviate any growing pains, we looked for someone with some lab experience, and not so much just working in a lab, but just knowing the ins and outs, knowing how to gown up to go into the vivarium, or how to enter a lab, put on whatever type of PPE, read the signage. So there's a lot of different aspects that go into it. But and it's funny because I happened to be walking out of my house one day on my way. I don't even remember where I was going, but I look across the street and the Amazon driver looked familiar. And it was, he worked as, I knew him because he worked as a security guard at EMD Serrano. And
Okay.
I called his name. He turned around and we got to talking, and he had just gotten laid off from a construction job. So he had the skills we were looking for in a facilities technician, but knowing him from that previous job, he was in the labs every day. He was in the penthouse checking on our equipment in the middle of the night when, the guys that were on call would get the call and not want to drive in unless they had to. So they'd ask him for the update. They'd ask him to reset the equipment. So he kind of got that crash course on life science equipment and how to work in a lab, how to go in the lab and check on equipment. So it ended up being a perfect fit, and he's been here, over 2 years now.
That's awesome. I
Yeah,
remember.
it's a crazy small world.
Yeah, I love it. It's like, so it's very random too, right? Well, yes and no. Like, you knew him from EMD, he knew your world very well, and there he is delivering for Amazon, and now he's working with you again. That's
Yep.
fantastic. It's awesome. Um, we could cover a multitude of things. I selfishly want to jump into the other things we talked about recently, Mike, and that's more so you, right? Like,
Yeah,
we can jump back to facilities in a few minutes if you want,
I'm
but
not that
like,
interesting.
no, yeah, you are. It's so we just spent, whatever time learning from you, right? About, best practices, just to, to recap, right? You do test runs, your preparedness, your communication trees and methods, and how to stay ahead of things. And when you hire someone, bring them in with lab experience, or at least lab familiarity, and the skills they need to do the job at hand too, right? So it's just, that was a nice global look at like what's happening in your world and what others could apply to. And if it's okay with you, can we flip to Huskies and football and family?
Sure.
Start wherever you want, man. I mean, like, if you want to tell us about some of your past, what you do, and why I mentioned Huskies and how football and kids and everything fits in here.
Yeah. So I played foot. I guess kind of what got me into facilities in the first place. I was a carpenter for about almost 10 years, residential, commercial construction, and I also played semi-pro football. So after my third knee surgery, I kind of made the decision to not want to deal with ladders and roofs and heavy duty construction. So I ended up finding a job in facilities.
And you were quarterback, right? For semi-pro?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent.
although I probably was a better coach than player. At least my knees tell me that.
Did your tight end or your wide receivers treat you better, or do you care to say?
I was actually better friends with the linemen,
Ah, yeah, that makes sense.
the
Sure.
guys that protected me.
Yep.
So actually, some of my best friends today were my linemen.
Awesome. So, all right, so you had the knee trouble, and you knew you didn't want to be dealing with ladders and whatnot, and so that got you into facilities, and
Yep.
then I think you've walked through a few different positions and really like escalated as you went here.
Yeah, I started in a hospital setting, New England Rehab Hospital in Woburn. From there, I moved on to life science at EMD Serono. I was there almost 5 years and got into more of a management track, working for a couple IFM contractors, the JLLs, the Sodexos, Able Engineering.
Mhm.
So I worked at sites like Pfizer in Cambridge, Millipore Sigma, and their three facilities in Burlington, Bedford, and Danvers, and then moved on to Pfizer in Andover, which is a GMP, you know, massive site.
And
And
you,
then,
I just wanted to ask for a distinction, Mike. Yeah, we don't have to go down this road, but IFM versus FM. Anything you can share with the audience about the differences there, and what's not better or not as good, but anything there to discuss.
I've kind of seen both sides of the fence, and I think you know there's advantages to IFM, and there's advantages to just having an in-house FM team.
I mean, is IFM, do they bring more resources because they're more I don't know, global or more?
They could. I mean, that's the idea. I've been on some sites where that's you know a better theory than practice.
Hmm.
Um, but it's all dependent on there's a lot of different companies out there now. It's the competition is that's probably one of the bigger um, things I've seen is the turnover in technicians
Mm.
in IFM. There's a lot of turnover, and the next company is usually offering that $1 more that gets a guy out the door. And whereas in-house, you have a team they feel more at home. They want to be there. They'll give up that dollar for that sense of
You're part of a team, and you have
exactly.
like more culture, I would think too, right?
Yeah, I mean, we built a great team here. I know that we work well together. Nobody wants to leave. Nobody, not saying anybody won't, but nobody
Hmm.
wants to. This,
Yeah, you got a good team down there. The good, and I think it's culture too. It's the way you treat each other.
yeah,
Well, here we are jumping right back into facilities. We were talking football, but that's
always
okay.
comes back.
Yeah, let's go back and forth. Um, I'm impressed with what you do with. I don't know what if you want to talk about the dogs and the adoption that you guys do, and some of the like the discussions around can we keep this one when you
Yeah,
foster
so
them.
yeah, we fostered quite a few dogs. My wife actually, she's hooked up with a couple of rescues in the area, and we had a husky, so we ended up getting another husky to keep him company. And then he was older, didn't want anything to do with the new dog, so we had to get a third dog to keep the second dog company. And then after we got set up with the different rescues, it's like we get sent pictures. She's usually the first call when they get a husky in, and I always get the pictures, and she'll show me on her phone and tell me the sob story behind the dog. Um, Usually I can't say no either, so we
Right.
end up with either fostering or we've kept a couple, um, but we ended up fostering. We fostered at least three or four more. We're up to four now, so and we have four kids as well. So the running joke in my family is that we're trying to be like the Stark family in Game of Thrones. Every kid has to have their own wolf.
That's great. How's the food bill, Mike?
That's crazy. I feel like every other day I'm running out for a new bag.
That's a good thing you guys do. That's a really good thing. I think didn't you share that one of the, and maybe you just said this, forgive me if you did. One of the dogs was an older dog and you took her in and she's just vibrant and fun and has a good time with the family and the kids, right?
Yeah, so a family was getting rid of her. They got a new puppy, and yeah, I think their exact quote was, "The kids love the puppy, and she doesn't have many good years left."
Hmm.
So we got her at 12, and a couple months ago she turned 15. She still hops around like a little puppy, and you know she's fitting well with our family and the other dogs. And I can't picture not having her at this point.
Good for you, man. Yeah, that's awesome. So, and not many good years left. Apparently, there were and there are. So
Oh
that's
yeah,
great.
she might live the others.
So, if I recall correctly, you're the oldest out of 10 in your family. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So I'm the oldest, and not much of an age gap between all of them either. I think the youngest is 13 years younger than me. So
Brothers, sisters? How many?
it's 5 brothers, 4 sisters.
Wow.
So
Pretty
six and
evenly
4.
distributed. Yeah.
Just about. My mom was one of 14. 7 boys, 7 girls. So that's apparently where she got that from.
Big
Um,
families.
I vowed to not be like her, so we only have 4, not counting the dogs. But
You could say 8.
yeah. So we
So
have
what was it
4.
like? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
My oldest is 12. Haley, she's tall. She's doing great. They're so such smart kids. Haley's 12. Fallon's 8. Um, Bronco is 3.5, and Zane is 2.
Awesome. Awesome. So 2 to 12.
It's actually Bronco too. Bronco is he got named after my grandfather's favorite football player, Bronco Nagurski.
Awesome.
Played for the Chicago Bears in the 30s.
I'm sure he's proud of that.
Yeah, you got a pretty big name to live up to, so you better start with football soon.
Looks like you tossed the pigskin around the yard a bit.
He's getting there.
That's awesome.
I'm glad I had the
Nice.
girls first, because that taught me a lot of patience.
Oh, I bet.
Otherwise, he'd
And
be
how does
carrying refrigerators like the kid on Little Giants.
So what was it like for you though, growing up with 9 brothers and sisters? Like what? Yeah, I grew up in a smaller family. So what was that like?
It was pretty crazy. We didn't have a big house either, so it was, we were all pretty much packed in. Um, but it was fun. I mean, we were really close. Me and my brother are only a year apart, so we were always close growing up, and it was cool seeing the younger ones grow up too. Once I got out of the house and it was old enough and moved out.
Good for you, man. Well, that's a pretty broad spectrum. We've got semi-pro football, facilities management, Huskies, oldest of 10 and 4 kids. It's and Mike, I have to say, I've learned a lot from you over the years too. Just watching, we've known each other since you were at EMD, of course.
Yep.
And yeah, it's been a pleasure learning from you, man. So and being friends this whole time too. That's always a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, for coming on. Appreciate you being here on Facility Rockstars. And if I may, if anyone's interested, there's a newsletter that comes out every Tuesday morning, and we'll put the link in the pod so you can sign up if you like. It's just a lot of what Mike just talked about, and a lot of facilities best practices. So thanks very much, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Jay.
All right. Have an awesome afternoon.
All right. Thanks, you as well.
It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Colutus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.